Imagine a world where decentralization and privacy are the cornerstone of our digital future. With over 15 years of experience in community building and 7 years in blockchain, Ben is at the forefront of Web3 innovation. As a pivotal member of IO, the team behind Cardano, he's been instrumental in shaping one of the most advanced decentralized networks. From successful hard forks to supporting over 3,000 stake pool operators and 1,200 D app launches, Ben Ben's work bridges developers, engineering, and community. Join me in welcoming Ben as we dive into our future of decentralization and privacy. I'm your host, Ash, and this is a show where I interview proven founders and industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you build, launch, and grow your business. I hope you enjoy the show. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ash. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Great. Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I have a couple. I can't remember the attribution, but one of them is the real action is the reaction. So, another way of saying that, which is the quote I first thought of, if I say it, you doubt it, but if you say it, it's true. And so, like, often, in communities, especially in these decentralized environments, it's not about having like a top-down approach where you're telling anybody what to do. It's much more understanding like how they see the world and what they want from it, and how you can nudge them along so that they can be more successful, and you can have people coordinating. So you often have to think about how the message or what you're talking about or what you're trying to do is going to be received by the person that gets it. So those are my two useful heuristics that I think about.
Indeed, indeed. No, I totally relate to that. And yeah, so I want to learn more about the community building and the process you have followed to bring the whole community to that big. But before we jump into that, would you like to share with our audience about Cardano? What does the product do? Who is it for? And what's the main problem you're helping to solve?
Cardano is a really interesting project. It's the founder is Charles Hoskinson. He had a vision of really banking the unbanked and making a real difference in the world. Freedoms of association, commerce, expression, these kind of things. This is 2016, and 1 second, I should have turned my phone off. That would have been far more professional. Yeah, so Cardano is really fascinating as well because it's a community that's now actually self-governing, which is what a lot of the communities and ecosystems haven't managed to achieve. So Charles's vision has gone from literally from himself to stake pool operators, which are the validators in the network, who before anything had come on were the earliest form of community in Cardano. Then the age of DeFi came, as smart contracts came online, and we're at a point now where Genesis keys have been burned, and the community is really going to be self-governing. So it's a fulfillment of a vision. It's really exciting, and I think Cardano is known very much for its community. I mean, even its critics, and there are critics of Cardano for sure, and people that don't like Charles, but yeah, everybody understands Cardano has one of the best and strongest communities in blockchain, and I think that's really important because it's not just the tech; it's actually people and relationships all the way down. And I think sometimes that people miss that. They're always chasing tech, but it's even if the tech is successful, it's the people that are behind it and that it serves that actually matter.
Indeed, indeed. And I couldn't agree more on this one because I myself is a big advocate of community. I have a small startup which predominantly focuses on community building and how to leverage your community to build your business better, more customer centric, user centric, etc. So let's dive into this community then. Tell our listeners more about when you started it, what was the vision, and how did you manage to get so many people on board with it?
People join communities because they want to be part of a solution to a problem. That's really what it's about. I think if we're talking about Cardano specifically, it's because the current financial structures are calcified and they don't really represent the people that they're serving. And we all understand that. If you look at kind of any tech, there's a tension between maybe providing a lot more freedom or whether there's kind of control. I'm thinking about financial systems, but it would apply to the internet, like the Web1 business model. The information was going to be free. Ash, maybe I'm too old. I don't know if you were there, remember, but the internet was this really amazing invention where information was going to be set free. But we've seen as it's developed, there's censorship, and now some would worry there's this tyranny, that is being used as a means of control. And you can see the same thing with social media, where people became able to publish or own their own audiences and become their own publishers. So I think that. And this is to answer your question, but broadly, like the Web3 space, like what's that about? What's the decentralization about? And the cyberpunks and where it all came from. It's really about self-sovereignty and people being able to, own their own work, own themselves, and not be, I think, trapped in a prison, like the Matrix, where, it's Andropolis that kind of I first listened to, and it's, the government should have all of the open and be transparent, and we should be able to see where the money's going and what the politicians are doing. And we all are, and Cardano isn't a privacy project. That's a separate topic because I worked on privacy projects. But and we should have a right to privacy, but it's in fact the other way around entirely. Like the banks and the institutions know exactly what you bought yesterday in the shop. They know what time you tend to buy it, when you go in, when you go out. So to bring that to a simpler point, it's about like self-sovereignty and different freedoms. And then Cardano, if you go back to the whiteboard video that Charles did, which is like pivotal, is I think what's really important is there's a lot of good tech, a lot of good people working, but you also need somebody that can share a vision, right? That can communicate something that goes beyond just the words to matter to people. And that's what Charles did with the vision around Cardano, of banking the unbanked, of a new financial system. And there's something interesting in there, like why was it so successful? Why do we have a good community in it? Part of it is because people join a community to solve a problem, but also we're all walking around every day telling ourselves a story about who we are, right? Like Ash is getting out of bed. I'm a podcaster. I'm an entrepreneur. I do these things because of these reasons and these values. And so part of the community and part of Charles being such a brilliant orator and sharing that vision is that people can identify something in there that will help manifest part of who they want to be. So people in Cardano wanted to have an impact on the world. They wanted to the world to be a better place. Some of the core kind of DNA in Cardano is this idea of measuring twice, cut once, the academic research, the papers that IO is famous for. I think a lot of people resonated with that because there was an authenticity in what Charles was saying, and we wanted to change the world in a meaningful way, and we think that the tech could do that. I think that's really where it came from. It wasn't just Charles, though. It was the stake pool operators and the early community, and there were some incentives, because incentives help behaviors too. And the things with the stake pool operators are they had the vision, they wanted to make a change in the world, they wanted to. But it was also a business. There's also, you would be able to earn stake by running a node and validating the network. So it was a combination of those things, right? You want to actualize yourself, you want to manifest like the person that you think you are, but you also want to have an incentive where you can run your business. All of the things that get you out of bed, Ash, right? So
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does, but I want to make it more easier for our listeners to understand. So, have you ever seen Silicon Valley, the show from States? It's the four guys. They create a Piper kind of compression engine. I don't know if you have. But at the end of the show, you've seen it. Perfect. So at the end of the show, they create this new internet thing, which is decentralized server kind of, where you don't need any space to host your website, and none of the things are blocked from there, things like that. Is Cardano is along the similar lines, or is it? I'm going in a very different direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's so you have smart contracts, so it is a decentralized computer in the cloud. The
Mhm.
decentralized being that nobody can control it.
Yeah.
It's spread out, and if you look at the Edinburgh Decentralization Index, Cardano is one of the most decentralized. If I haven't looked at the latest numbers, but it's one of the most decentralized networks. That's the Nakamoto coefficient.
Hmm.
But it's also a financial operating system. So if you look within Cardano's ecosystem, there are different technologies being developed. So you have like scalability technologies like Hydra. You have digital identity products like Atala, like DIDS. And if you zoom out, actually, one of the best analogies I ever heard about blockchain itself is like, what's the problem that blockchain is solving? And then we'll
Hmm.
go to Cardano, right? The problem that blockchain is solving is it's a clock. It's time. It's what's happened in what order, right?
Hmm.
So in space or decentralized space, right, there's no references. You don't know where you are, what you're doing. How do you know not just what happened, but what happened in what order? So this is the ledger idea. But the simplest way to explain that is blockchain is a clock. That's the problem that it's solving. It's time, right? So now you've got blockchain. It's solving time, and we understood that. That's what Bitcoin was doing, and the use case there was money. What Cardano is doing is adding stuff on top of that, being able to compute on it. So a financial operating system needs digital identity, so you know who they are, and there's a history and there's a reputation. There's data preserving tech like Midnight that's also being worked on by IO. There's a product suite in Charles's vision
Hmm.
that works together. It's different cogs working together. So it's not just that Cardano is the base layer protocol. Like I guess an analogy would be like Apple builds its OS, right? But then it has an app store, but also has a phone because that's a vehicle to pull people in and drive it's a vehicle for capturing that value, right? They're not really in the business of selling phones, right? They're in the business of having an app store that has all of these transactions running through it. Like that.
Like a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, like the networks, the phones are there to bring people in and capture them. In a little bit, maybe like at the moment, wallets would be the best example of that in Web3. So like, Ledger, Trezor, wallets are a hot property because it connects to everything else, right? So a
Hmm.
bit like an iPhone would connect you to all parts of the system. But is
Yeah.
the iPhone making you the money, or is it all of the if you're Apple, by the way, or
Hmm.
is it the transactions that are happening? You know? Um,
Yeah.
but
I
you
think,
so back to Cardano, yeah.
sorry, I didn't want it to cut you off, but I think the most of the papers which I've read, they all say that most of the revenue which Apple generate, or most profitable stream of their whole ecosystem, is sort of like App Store and in-app purchases, because that gives them like literally 30% out of any transaction going through their
Mm.
ecosystem, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we already know he's the guy from Hey, really famous. He wrote. Oh, I'm gonna sound silly. Was it Ruby or Miles? A very famous guy, and he was having like a lawsuit with Apple, right? Allegedly, I can't remember the details. Don't sue me. But this is very recent, right? Where he's
Mhm.
arguing with Apple because they want to take 30% or something.
Yeah.
The point of Cardano is, yeah, it's like a financial operating system, but the point of it is financial inclusion. And I think there were a lot of narratives in Web3 and in blockchain, and so from the outside of it, people are critical of it, because I know there are people who are virtuous that are really, really trying to find community product fit, and build out the tech. But there's also a lot of money being raised where that potential hasn't been met, right? So like that's the difficulty. There's a lot of narratives, and how do you differentiate between what's just narrative and who's really building, who's really doing something that they are trying to make a change in the world? So financial inclusion, the answer was like, it's a financial operating system, but it's decentralized. But for what reason? For financial inclusion. And so once you have that protocol and that base layer, then you can look at like, okay, so what else do you need? Well, you probably need digital identity. You probably
Mm.
need scalability tech. You need a wallet so people can navigate the ecosystem as well. That'd be my the simplest answer.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that now. So let's say if I am producing an app and a web app, and I
Mhm.
want my users to access the app only when they pay me a certain amount of money, like $10 a month, right? Something like that. So I go to Codana, potentially have some kind of setup there, have that like incorporated into my app. How does that work?
That's interesting. So there's two things that are really interesting. One, like Substack and Patreon have engaged in censorship, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, but imagine if you're a creator and you build up your audience, you've invested your life in that. I just love what you were describing there, because you would want some sort of decentralized version of that, so that it's not the case of like we just hope that centralized bodies, governments, and states don't take our. And it's not even the state, is it? Because it's done through. Somebody said to me once, like, uh, authority is centralized in the East because you know who's in charge and exactly what you can't do. In the West, it's decentralized because the power or the censorship is done through kind of umbrella companies or private companies. But ultimately, if we don't like what you're saying, you're going to get censored, and you see that in Substack and Patreon. If you go back and have a look at what's gone on since in the past 20 years. So to your point there, I think that was really interesting. That's a really good use case where actually maybe you want to have a subscription business, but you don't want to have you don't want one entity to be owning it, or somebody gets hired in a role and decides that they're going to take a political slant on it.
Mhm.
To answer your other question, which is, and you can tell me if I get this right, but what I understood was, if I had an app idea or something like this in Cardano itself, you have Catalyst, which is an innovation engine. So often you would see like proposals being submitted on, I want to build this. This is how I think it's going to benefit Cardano and how it's going to further the tech. And people would submit proposals and they would get voted on and they would get funding. But it's not just that you're going to get some funding. It's also a wonderful kind of a marketing opportunity to engage with people that understand Cardano, and that's where like a lot of relationships are formed. And then you're saying like, well, what are the steps I'm going to need to take to get this app to communicate with the network? That's a
Mhm.
good place to start. You set out like what you want to do. And I'm doing something similar, actually. We were talking about when I'm writing, this is not Catalyst, this is Cardano improvement proposals. And in Web3 ecosystems, you often have this improvement proposal process, right? And one of them is that you would write a problem statement. Then you can move on to an improvement proposal, which would be like the solution. And then you're going to be able to rally people around to build on top of it. And those improvement proposal processes are, you're not voting on something there like in Catalyst where you might get some funding. The improvement proposal process is a way of having a more structured quality conversation where I go away and do my best to make the very best argument that I can, run it past lots of people, take the criticism, and you eventually end up with, when you read through those improvement proposals, a high quality discussion. That's the idea.
Got
So
it.
to answer your question, that's how you would do. You would engage the community. There were devs there. It's a good place to put your ideas forward first and pitch
Mhm.
people and socialize them. Um, Unless you mean the technical steps, in which case we have the docs, and it depends on which product that you'd want to connect it to. So if you
Yeah.
want to connect it to DIDs because you want to be able to identify who's coming from Cardano, it'd be different to a different use case.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, have you ever been to these places where they have these banks where they have the lockers in the banks where you pay to have a locker in the bank, and then you have a
Yeah,
key, and then the banker has a key, and then you have to book an appointment and go and open it,
yeah,
and then only you can access whatever is inside. And it obviously belongs to you, but you pay for it. So I was actually thinking to create something digitally with Web3 where you have a locker and you have the key for it, and whatever information you put in there digital will be yours until unless you unlock it with that key. But I guess I have to go into the community and then talk to people around and see how technically that's possible, isn't it?
yeah. It'll be like a wallet.
Yeah.
There'll be some form of a wallet, and there'll be plenty of wallets that you could pick up and fork as well, because a lot of it is open source. Yeah.
Hmm. Got
And
it,
there's
got it. Okay.
interesting things like dead man switches as well. So what if let's say you lose your private key or something, how are you going to recover them? At the moment you can't do that, but a dead man's switch should be like, okay, if I don't touch this wallet for 5 years and there's no activity, send my wife the keys, or something
Uh,
like this, right? So you could, yeah, there's some interesting things you could do there.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. Yeah, because I've heard these stories where people have exchanged, I don't know, 100 bitcoins for a pizza.
Right.
It was one of the famous story, and then they put that bitcoins on a pen drive, and nobody knows where it is because they cannot find it. Something like that.
Yeah. That'd be, I mean, yeah, you'd have to be really enlightened to be able to walk away from that and not feel a grievance.
Yeah, yeah, great. So let's talk about these communities, DevRel and IOHK. What are these communities? Who can join these communities? What kind of discussions are going on there? And what is your role in that? And how did you build them?
So Cardano is an ecosystem. So it's bigger than a community. Maybe you can make the argument that in 2016, when Charles has shares his vision and publishes the whiteboard video, I think we had 150 stateful operators in the incentivized testnet. Okay, fair enough. That's a community. It's small, right? But as the communities get bigger and bigger and bigger, eventually it gets kind of like mitosis, and they're going to break up into smaller communities, and you end up with this ecosystem because it's so big that the edges have expanded so far. It's difficult for it to be known by all. So Cardano is at this point an ecosystem which has communities within it. Is a way of thinking about it. My job, is very much about, to the communities that we work with or serve, I'm the face of the business. But to the business and the different teams that are within it, I'm the face of the community. So there's this bridge, right? And communities are really, from the point of view of in tech, it's about building relationships and trust, right? It's also worth pointing out, I think sort of the business model of ecosystems and Web3. So like Web1 is like value creation, where like IBM build a computer and they sell it, they get some money. Web2 is like data is oil. Cambridge Analytica, Facebook, Google, they're going to sell the data. So if you're not paying, you're the product, right? So in Web2, all of your data is the oil, and they're going to sell that, and that's kind of the business model there. In Web3, ecosystems are about, like using the Apple analogy, right? You want an ecosystem to exist and other people to take roles and responsibilities in it. So you're giving up control. You're giving up these parts of the different roles that are in that ecosystem that will be off opportunities to everybody else. But the point is, you do that because you want the pie to be bigger for everybody. If you try and play every role, you're going to be limited. Okay, so with these ecosystems, that's kind of like the business model, is that they expand and everybody within it is working towards a common end of a vision, and it's going to benefit the whole. So coming back to you asking me about my role in Cardano, there are different communities within it. There are stateful operators who are validating the network, so they're providing security for the network. There are developers that are building on the network. So like the App Store, there are third-party developers that are building their own project with the protocol. There are developers that are building the protocol. So those if we're using this Apple analogy, they're not third-party developers. Those developers are actually building the actual OS or iOS or the code for the phone or whatever. Right, so that's the protocol. Then, as the ecosystem's grown and grown, other interesting tech emerges like NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. So your point about Bitcoin, with 10,000 Bitcoin buying the pizza, every one of those Bitcoin is the same as any other Bitcoin. There's no difference with it, right? That's fungible. Non-fungible is there is a difference. So painting a Picasso can't be broken up into 100 different paintings of Picasso. You just get one, right? If you break it, it's broken. So yeah, you have NFT communities, and this is really interesting because there was a lot of creative people that were coming in. Huge untapped resources in the ecosystem are the people that really care about the outcome and the vision that's shared, and they want to be part of it, but maybe they're not technical, right? Maybe they're not a developer. And so this kind of creative aspect was really interesting for a lot of people, and art and different things you can do with NFTs. I've seen like Book.io is doing books. You could be doing contracts. There's many different use cases with it. And what else? So there's all these different communities, and within within IO, we're a research and engineering organization. We're moving towards a venture studio, so there are these different spin-outs, which are basically like different products with their own leadership or their own autonomy. So you have like an orbiting system, don't you? You have IO, and you have these different products and startups that are kind of at different stages that are emerging. So my job really is in strategically looking at the different gaps and opportunities and providing advice to these different spinouts about how to drive community-led growth and community product fit around the businesses that they're working on. And that's it. That's looking at maybe like areas that they haven't thought about. Like by definition, for example, marketing tends to be a shorter term view, right? Everybody knows they want marketing, so there's demand there for it. And so the demand's coming in, lots of orders being taken, everybody wants social media or websites, this kind of stuff. And you're going to get a big spike in attention. But with community and DevRel, you're talking about longer term bets. It's about relationships and trust. And so how are you going to have relationships that are in the end going to drive network effects and exponential growth around a product? How are you going to activate and amplify community advocacy? Because like a lot of ambassador programs suck, right? A lot of ambassador programs, it's just you end up paying people for output, and they have a persistent, it's a risk because you're giving them a persistent status that they're going to represent you, Ash, right? So yeah, I think ambassador programs are often poorly done. Maybe I've got off on a tangent here, so bring me back to where we were. Did I answer the question?
Yes, so I was more looking about looking for more information around how are you enabling the whole community, which obviously you have answered. So that's great. So when you've been deeply, sorry, go on.
So in 3 points, we're a service. My team and I are a service to product, and we're helping drive community-led growth around products, and that's going to entail adoption, retention, and reputation. So then for engineering, we're also a service for engineering because we're looking after the relationships and working on feedback loops with the different engineers and letting engineering understand, how developers are feeling, what the experience is. That's what we're doing like within IO. So engineering and product, but then you're also looking up at the whole ecosystem and thinking, how can IO be a good player in this ecosystem? And how can I help executives and different leaderships understand what's going on around them and bring these feedback loops in? So like with any relationship, active listening is important. And responding in a way that's relevant to what your needs are, Ash, is important. So it's these things that scale.
Got it. Okay. So, but then what upcoming trends or innovations, in your opinion, in blockchain technology are, the the one which excited you? Like, how do you think they will impact the broader tech landscape?
I mean, I'm really excited around the work that's going on within Midnight, within IO, which is around data privacy. I think that's kind of critical to the blockchain. I also think partner chains is really interesting. There will be opportunities for stake pool operators. I suppose to make that simple, it's cross-chain collaboration really that I'm interested in the most. The data preserving stuff is great, but I think we're coming to an era where there was like a lot of fragmentation. You had like Ethereum, and Ethereum's L2s have kind of extracted a lot of value out of Ethereum and almost becoming their own entity. So I think you kind of risk some fragmentation there, and does the L1 really benefit from it? And sometimes you see some solutions where people are trying to build interoperability layers across the top of them. But I think we're going to come to a point where it's not the age of kind of more and more different blockchains getting launched and being super successful. I think is coming to an end. like in like Web 2, there were some winners that were determined to the end, weren't there? Google, Amazon, this kind of thing. So I think in Web 3, you're going to come to a point where there are some main chains that have clearly differentiated value, but there's going to be this interoperability. This technical interoperability will be solved. So cross-chain collaboration is going to be much more important. And if you think about it, I was talking with my wife about this actually. So I was like, so once it's seamless that you can transfer value and communicate across these different chains, and the infrastructure doesn't really matter. Like it's okay, yeah. I don't have to think about the infrastructure, is what I'm trying to
Mm,
say, right? So whatever L1 I happen to be using, it's not my primary concern because I'm just thinking about my user experience and the usability of what I'm doing. I think
mm,
it's really important because when that technical interoperability has happened, you're still left with people and relationships. And so like the human interoperability is really the most important. And now we can think about like the world we're in at the minute where, think of the singer, was he Robin Williams, talking about like we live in a post-truth world and
mm,
we don't know, we can't trust what we're told, like the medical advice, like during COVID, whatever views you got in it, or there were other instances like different elections that have happened in the UK and America where we all feel like we're in some part of disinformation psyops campaign. Brett
mm,
Weinstein was recently on that podcast talking about like it's not that people, it's not that you people don't want you to know certain things. It's to why they're being censored, this kind of stuff, or why doesn't the things in the news make sense. It's that you're
mm,
being instructed. So there's still this kind of centralized um, control, and Web3 is promising to kind of put some of that control back into people's hands. And so like let's say if we're successful, that happens, what
mm,
are we going to do with that power, right? That's like the zeitgeist of where we are. Is I feel there's a lot of centralization of power in the past few hundred years, and does humanity have a hope of pulling back from that before Charles did a really amazing video on the 5 pillars of the 21st century. You can look it up on his channel, and he talks about AI, blockchain, biosynthetics, and quantum computing. And
mm,
like these things could change everything around us in a way unlike anything prior and like any other revolution. Because if I can change the structure within your DNA, and I have a blockchain that protects me from people like attacking against me, and I have AI, so I can so these things could really have profound effects. And we're in this moment, like in the eye of the storm, this pause where there is this tech that's promising that maybe we could take that back. The idea of you to change a system, you have to change how the game's played. You can't just
mm,
keep trying to compete, right? So if that's made sense, I'm most interested about human interoperability and coordination using these tools and this tech. Because once
mm.
the tech exists, it's not, that's only part of the story, If we're
Yeah.
successful, then what,
Even Elon Musk mentioned, I don't remember which interview was it, that there's like 5% chance of humans to survive against AI in
Yeah.
future some point. So I was like,
Just AI,
okay,
just AI.
yeah,
But what about if biosynthetics are in play
yeah,
and it's like, yeah.
something like that.
And what if
Yeah.
you don't want think about like mortgages, and when money's made so freely available, everybody's taking debt on to buy a mortgage. You're in a
Mm,
position where like if you don't take that debt on, you're priced out of the market. So what are you going to do when biosynthetics are available and people are taking what's the word I'm looking for, enhancements and chips, and to make them smarter, better, whatever. If you don't want to do that, like, is there going to be a cost where you're priced out of certain opportunities? It's terrifying. It's like, because I have
yeah, yeah.
kids, so it's terrifying thinking about that.
It's like everybody will be like smartest person in the room. Then like how we are going to survive? Like one of the things which my grandmother always used to tell me is you cannot marry yourself. This was very deep. I mean, in her language it sounds better, but when I translate it in English, it's so you want to marry up, or you want to be a couple or partner with somebody who has some kind of fundamental differences which attract you with each other. So if you clone yourself, and if you clone yourself, that person will like exactly the same food, exactly the same clothes, exactly the same movies, everything same, but you will not be happy with that person because it's just your clone. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
everybody in the room, if they get smarter exactly the same level, then where's the what do you call it, where's the
And the group think, right? And the group think, like where you see certain areas of America, like tech came out of Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and you definitely could identify a culture there, right? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's really interesting. And you're right, because I mean, my wife is completely different to me, like
Mhm.
completely opposite, you know. And like we bicker on all the little things, but on the big things we're always aligned. So I think we're very lucky, really, in that. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's definitely different strokes, different folks.
Great, great. And Ben, somebody like me who's fresh in Web3, trying to understand it, looking back on your journey with Cardano or other blockchain projects, what advice would you give to those new to the field or aiming to make a significant impact in Web3?
It's there's like a lot of noise, so really it starts with where are you getting your information from, and what are you listening to, um Web3 is also such a mix and blend of different interests and skill sets, governance, um financial instruments, these ideas, these philosophical ideas about where it started with cypherpunks and kind of the decentralization and the self sovereignty. Um, in Cardano, anyway, what's happening right now, and it's really timely, is Intersect, which is a members based organization, is having votes, and it's as Cardano is self-governing, and there's Genesis keys have been burned, which means that the founding pioneers, such as IOHK, Cardano Foundation, and Emergo, no longer have control over the chain, and it has to be voted on by the community, and the treasury is going to be unlocked. I think
Mm,
Cardano is a really interesting blockchain to get involved in. Um, Pardon me, there were two underlying, because Ethereum is account based, and Cardano is UTXO, which is extended UTXO, which is similar to Bitcoin. Okay, the difference is that account base is like just put numbers into your bank account, like your bank does, right? They make you a loan, they just type some numbers and they appear.
mm,
UTXO is like, oh, I'm going to give you £10. You're going to have to give me change, and it breaks up into different coins. And so there were these different models, but there were some real benefits to UTXO. So I think Cardano is a really interesting community to get involved in. And just right now, if you were to get involved in Intersect and talk to the members in Intersect, those would be some of the people that are the most informed, the most open, probably as well, the most welcoming. So a lot of action in Cardano is happening in Intersect at the moment. It's
mhm,
also happening in Catalyst. So that's probably where I would start. Um, in a practical sense, this is, don't know if this helps anyone, but I also like, X or Twitter is really, really good if you actually use lists, and you just pick for really strong signal across some subject matters, because you can use Boolean searches within lists, which may be a bit of a power user thing, but it's really good, because sometimes, like, let's say you're reading about a topic and
mm,
you're not sure, who's right, who's wrong, just separate the different points of view, and then you can kind of set up like a red team, blue team thing, and understand it. Actually, a better answer to that question as well would have been, I really value those platforms where there's a direct relationship between the audience and the people paying the author or the creator. So it's directly. So it's things like Substack are really interesting to me, because the author isn't some kind of big media publication that's just trying to get clicks. I'd rather get my information from someone that I'm paying money to, or even if I'm getting the freemium model, they are getting paid by their community, right? Because I think that there's a much more direct relationship with value. So if I
mm,
was getting into all of this again, I'd probably be trying to dig around in who are the best accounts on Twitter, who are the best accounts on Substack. I would sign up to the forums for the protocols that I thought were interesting. So you might find Bitcoin, you might find things like Cardano or Polkadot or Algorand or Cosmos. You might go and sign up to those and kind of see what's going on in there. And what you'll find is at the moment, like, all these ecosystems are quite fragmented, and so lots of interesting things happening, but they're not necessarily all joined up because there's still this kind of tribalism in Web3, because people invest their time, money, and energy, and so they really have a strong relationship with the ecosystem they're in. But as I said earlier, I think we're coming to a time where the technical interoperability barriers are going to drop and fall, and what it's going to come down to is who is really good at coordinating, cooperating at scale within these ecosystems.
Got it. And you mentioned that these platform or the community could be available on Discord or any other places you could suggest.
Yeah, there's loads of Cardano subreddits on Reddit. There's IO has a technical Discord. We've got about 11,000 people in it. Cardano Foundation has a forum. That is probably a really good place to start. You just type in Cardano forum, and it's the Cardano Foundation one. Intersect, if you sign up to it, I think it's free. Has a Discord that you can join. Yeah, and the Cardano community, before someone tells me off, not everyone in the Cardano community is on Twitter. Of course not, right? If you're technical, improvement proposals and the SIP program is interesting. People are very active on Telegram. People are very active on Twitter too. I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open. So, if anybody wants like relevant links, they can just DM me. And my handle is Benno Hanlon, just without the spaces.
Awesome. Perfect. Great stuff. So I'm enjoying this conversation so much, Ben, but obviously we are limited of time. So just before we jump on our six quick fire question round, just want to ask you a personal question. Throughout your journey and experience, there must have been some valuable lessons learned. If you don't mind sharing or reflect on your experience and tell us about one mistake or a setback you encountered along the way, and based on that, what advice would you give our listeners to for under Web3 space?
I'm trying to articulate this, but because I started working. I built a community for World Bank of Scotland. Then I was involved in market research community. So I got into blockchain actually through bounties, and then part-time in privacy projects, and then a community analyst, then head of community, then director. So I worked my way up from the very bottom all of the way up through these technical projects. And so I really found it was really interesting. Why are my ideas being heard? Why aren't I getting approved? What am I doing that isn't working? I'm putting these ideas forward, but they wouldn't get traction. And so the past sort of 7 years have really been amazing, because it's really made me think about how to be effective in these organizations, or, Ash, how to manage up, basically, right? And I think that it's human nature to often look at the behaviors of people around us, and we judge them oh, this is unreasonable, I don't like how they're talking to me, and this kind of stuff. But it's far more valuable to get out of your perception and try and look at things from their perspective. And what I'm trying to say is that very often people can end up in this kind of acted upon position. So things happen, my boss says no, things are going on around me, right? And if you feel you're acted upon and you can't take this, as I've got more senior, it's very interesting how much responsibility and accountability different people are willing to take. It's just really fascinating. And I'm talking about initiative. I'm talking about if you tell me, Ben, go to A and B, and then you're off for 2 weeks because you're sick, am I going to be at F when you get here, or will I have stopped at B? So what my point is that people can often fall into this kind of acted upon position where it means they're passive, right? Things are being done to them, and they fall into this kind of passive state. And always, you need to take responsibility for the outcomes, even if they're not your fault, because if you can work out, if you can use your initiative to work out what could I have done differently to have a better outcome, you become an
Mm,
actor. So now you're in a kind of a proactive state. And so I think I didn't think this before I started working in these environments, because you were dealing with such smart people. Like, I'm often in rooms, so I'm definitely the dumbest person. And I was at times thinking, you couldn't pay to be in a room like this. Like, listening to some of the conversations, it was
mm,
amazing. So, but it's not just intelligence, right? It's like, especially in tech and these innovative environments, everything is changing all of the time. Like, there's all
yeah.
this different innovation, everything's happening at the edges. So you've got to be kind of comfortable to be building in flight. So that means, like, getting stuff 70 to 80% done, but also you need to be the kind of outcome independent, because things will pivot, things will change, and be flexible enough to work with that. So what I'm really trying to say is, things are very often like non-linear and they're high tempo. And for that reason, because so much is going on around you and it's so chaotic, it's really easy to feel like these things are happening to me, right?
Mm,
They're happening to me. But actually, if you take a really firm understanding in your mind that, like, you're where the sharp edge is, you're the cutting edge. And if I was reporting to you, Ash, I'm thinking about how can I make Ash smarter, better? It's like, play your position, right? Play your
mm,
position really well. What can I do to help the person above me be more effective? It's not out of I'm not doing it out of some kind of like it's because that's how the whole team is more effective to do it like that.
got it.
So
Like
yeah,
empowering
that's
each other in the team and making sure that we are, keeping each other's
but
back.
you're not necessarily doing it for other people's benefit. It's like, you
Mm,
deserve to have your own time and work have the impact it
mm,
should do. And you will have more impact when you just get over yourself and stop worrying about, like, whether Ash spoke to me in the correct way. And instead, it's much more about, like, every time Ash interacts with me, how am I going to help him understand that
mm,
I'm somebody that gets it. So I always, when I deal with like devs or like senior executives, I always think, right, the world looks like this to them. This is not thinking of anyone in particular, right? But the world is a big dark forest, right? And the dark deep forest is a forest of idiots, right? And in a small tiny clearing are like the enlightened few who kind of get it, right? So if I was working with you, the relationship I'm trying to build is primarily, first of all, helping you understand, like, I'm not a bozo, right? Like, that I'm in that circle. And that's
mm.
the most important thing, because people have to want to work with you. If they don't want to work with you, everything you do is going to be hard and it will fail.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally agree. Cool. So let's move on to our lightning round. Then we have
Sure.
6 quick fire question, and you can answer them as quickly as possible. You ready?
Yeah.
Great. What are the top 3 techs which you think will be most influential in next 10 years in Web3 space?
I really think privacy tech, AI, and I don't know that it's tech, but I think community is going to be so in the age of AI, where everything to do with like producing content, videos can all be fake, this kind of stuff.
Mm,
Authenticity is going to be what's scarce, and so actually, I think community and peer-to-peer experiences is going to become a real moat. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Totally agree with you on that, and I'm on the same vertical at the moment with the community. So yeah, what book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Oh, um, I read The Mystery of Banking by Murray Rothbard was really good.
Hmm.
I like Robert Greene, The 48 Laws of Power, but I like it because I mean, this is you saying about wives earlier. I remember when I first met my wife, we'd be driving back from a party or something, and she would say to me, well, Ben, look, the reason that somebody said this is this, and this. And I would be like,
Mhm.
no, like, no, don't be ridiculous. She was always right because she had a really good theory of mind. And so 48 Laws of Power, what I liked about it is it gave me like a framework and a rationale to understand like how some people might be, what are the operating models in other people's heads, because you don't know, right? So yeah, I like those very much. And I'm reading The Famous Five to my kids at the moment from Ina Blyden. So I don't know if anybody wants a book recommendation for
Yeah,
that, but
yeah, why not? The kids'
yeah.
books are lovely. Great. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
I think it's really being able to communicate a vision that people want to get around. It's
Mm.
so important. Like when the vision isn't communicated and there's a lot of uncertainty, you know, that's what's so important is that you're communicating something that people can understand, that they want to support, and that's going to value them. And I think that if you can do that, it forgives a lot of other sins.
Yeah, yeah. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
Notion, I love. It took me a long time to get into it. Notion's good. I used to feel so anxious about Jira. I really I actually felt quite. It gave me imposter syndrome. And then over 3 years, I got to use it, and now I love it. So, it took. And very often these things are the only way to really understand them is you just have to really immerse yourself in it. There's no way, there's no shortcuts. Basically, you just have to get
Yeah.
into it. But once you do, it's good. Yeah, Jira's good. Notion's good. Claude AI is great. If you use the prompts, don't just take what it outputs. It's a great thinking tool, right? So I don't think AI is like a great content tool. It's a great thinking tool to get you very quickly to a point where you're being more productive in tweaking what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. What's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
All right. Well, bro, I'm doing in the Cardano forums, I'm working on interoperability metadata standards. So the idea is you're looking at these ecosystems and rather than a map that shows actors and logos that you'd often see, defining what the roles, relationships, and sectors are. So the landscape, because I want to be able to visually represent, and also text based, so third party developers can use it.
Mm.
The value chains of relationships in an ecosystem. So I'm working on that at the minute, and I think if you did have a set of standards like that, you can do some really interesting things like building on top of them. So like an ambassador program or DREPs or in Cardano at the moment, where you could put like a human sensory network. So different people in the ecosystem who are deeply integrated can be incentivized to sort of update what they're hearing in terms of needs, problems, challenges. And it's like ethnography on the blockchain. It'd be very interesting. It's out there. Like in a year's time, let me come back. I'll show you. But
Yeah.
I'm really interested. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I would love to see that in real world at some point. And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
Um, it's fun. I used to be a chef. I went to catering college, and
Hmm.
I worked in like that's where I first started. Was working in kitchens, and I kind of went and worked on a hospitality guide, which has got me into online communities, and then I got into the All Bank of Scotland communities and stuff. But before, when I first went into the workforce, yeah, I was interested in chefing and catering and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's awesome. Great stuff. Adding to the community.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
And
then.
oh yeah, and these glasses actually, I bought these glasses as a whim, as a joke. Like I thought it was just for fun, but actually
Mm,
in Cardano, I think they're probably the best investment I ever made because when you're at events and stuff, people know who you are instantly. There's no ambiguity, and so it was a
mm.
real social lubricant, because people felt comfortable coming up and talking to you because they had a high degree of certainty who you were. So that would be the second thing.
Fun thing. Are you doing any events? In
Yeah, I'm
coming
going to
months.
Japan on Sunday on a research tour, which I'm really looking
Mm.
forward to. And I'm really interested in mapping and exploring Japan's community, and kind of helping the broader Cardano community understand Japan. And Japan's definitely somewhere I've really wanted to go, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's happening next week. So if you're in Japan and this is published before then let me know.
Perfect. Great. Ben, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story and unpacking last years of building this amazing platform with your community. If people want to connect with you, check out Cardano, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn or Twitter. My DMs are open on Twitter. It's just at Ben O'Hanlon, no spaces, no apostrophe. Same for Telegram. LinkedIn is /memetics. And yeah, I'm always happy to have a chat, And shout out to Daniel Alfin, who is a mentor of mine. You went 10, 15 years ago, I don't know, a long time ago, was like helping me understand how to use LinkedIn. And the reason I got to know you, Ash. So yeah, appreciate that connection from Daniel.
Perfect. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Thanks, Ash. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Founders Podcast. I hope you found our conversation with Ben insightful and inspiring. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and keep building.